It's March 4th, 1801. The victor of America's fourth presidential election is Thomas Jefferson, and he ascends the steps of the United States' new Capitol building to give his inaugural address to the nation he helped create. No American could doubt his credentials for the job. He had written the Declaration of Independence, been an ambassador to America's first ally in France, been Secretary of State, and he also possessed an impressive intellect with an expertise in many different areas of life. It's easy to understand what made the Virginians such a good candidate for the young office of the presidency. The Americans in the Capitol that day were seeing history. However, the momentous occasion wasn't just due to the fact that Jefferson had become president. In fact, it really didn't have much to do with Jefferson at all. Instead, the credit, prestige, and respect that day lies with Jefferson's one-time friend and the man who he served under as vice president. The reason why the election of 1800 is America's most important election is because of the second president of the United States, John Adams. To fully understand how momentous the occasion was, it's important to take a brief look at early American history. George Washington, our first president, was an obvious choice as the nation's leader. He came from an advantageous background, being a wealthy plantation owner and owner of vast amounts of land in Virginia, had been the head of the Continental Army, and really served and directed the country during the American Revolution. More importantly, it was well known how Washington was a man of true integrity and humility. Washington remains to be the only president elected unanimously, which was done twice. But Washington was not meant to reign forever. By the end of his second term, Washington had grown tired of the infighting in his cabinet, tired of the hit pieces in the press, and tired of the presidency. After 2 terms in office, an office Washington initially declined and didn't want, he chose to retire back to Virginia to work on his farm. This leaves us with Washington's successor, John Adams. Adams physically contrasted from President Washington. Adams was shorter, fatter, and much less imposing. Personality-wise, Adams could be abrasive to those who he worked with and cared little about the sensitivity of others when it came to debates. However, what Adams lacked in personality, he made up for elsewhere in his character. Out of the group of men called America's Founding Fathers, Adams was an intelligent, if not more so, than the others. Like many others, he had been a lawyer, growing up in a strong Christian background, and had served his country in many different facets. He was vice president, minister to Britain, France, and the Netherlands. He served in the Continental Congress, and helped review the Declaration of Independence with Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. According to his peers, Adams was a level-headed man who thought deeply about his actions. Whether or not this is due to his Christian, law, or service background is unsure, but Adams was a man run by principle and thought. A deeper dive into his administration can show this, but to stay on topic, we're going to focus on the election that he lost. By the end of his administration, Adams had become deeply unpopular with the public, his party, the Federalists, and obviously his opponents in Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. Even though he averted war with the French and the British, Adams had alienated many through his actions. It became clear that he was going to lose the upcoming election to Thomas Jefferson later in his only term. It's here where John Adams turned this election into America's turning point and into the stable republic we have today. The United States of America was at a crossroads. Would John Adams turn the presidency over to a bitter rival and old friend in Thomas Jefferson, or would he retain the office against the wishes of the American people? It's very easy to understand why Adams could have believed he earned the right to remain president. After all, he served nearly his entire adult life for this country. He had been an ambassador to Great Britain and France, both of whom were on the verge of war with the newly established USA. He served under Washington for 8 years and understood well what the office required. On top of that, he had been a lawyer for the British men accused of murdering Bostonians in the Boston Massacre. He had the experience, character, and mastery needed to be a successful president. But John Adams had the character to walk away from Washington, D.C. and return home to Massachusetts. George Washington was the first president to step away from office. However, Adams walked away from office after losing the presidency to a political party he believed could put the country into war. In spite of everything Adams had done, he still relinquished the highest office in a country he helped create. Throughout history, it's possible to look at historic republics and democracies and find violent revolutions because the administration rejected the will of their people. Greece and Rome, foundations for the United States government, had severe and violent revolutions. Today, in different parts of the world, those in power refuse to relinquish their hold on government and cause crises. By accepting the loss, President John Adams accomplished many things. The first is something called the peaceful transfer of power from every administration to the next. Second is setting the expectation that a losing administration will hand the reins of power to their successor, bitterly or with grace. A third accomplishment through this act is setting expectations that all forms of democratic government change regimes with peace and dignity. John Adams is a fascinating man in his own right. Unfortunately, he's forgotten among the more famous titans like Washington, Lincoln, the Roosevelts, Kennedy, and Reagan. But it can be argued that he is one of the most important leaders in this country's history. While his administration certainly has its blemishes, he achieved incredible things in his time in office, which is capped off by setting an unknown precedent in world history: the peaceful transfer of power. When Thomas Jefferson assumed the presidency on March 4th, 1801, it was in the absence of his one-time friend, John Adams. But Adams left Jefferson and those in attendance far more than they may have realized. At another time, we'll take a look at America's forgotten leaders. But when Inauguration Day comes around, it's right to silently thank John Adams for the gift he gave us after the election of 1800. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you'll join us next time where we go over what fascism is, and I hope you have a great day.